Hi, I'm Jules Green. Yeah, so just to get started, Ransom Canyon is this romance like Western drama that's set in Texas Hill Country.
Mhm.
So, what drew you to this project? Are you really big on Westerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in the modern, television sort of westerns that we've been exposed to, like Yellowstone and and all the Yellowstone spin-offs, they're fantastic. I mean, I haven't met anyone who doesn't love those. I love those. Um, and yeah, I mean, I remember getting the project, the audition initially, and I was really drawn to the character. He's one of the coolest characters that I've gotten to play. And, through I can't give too much away, but dealing with his past and all these sort of secrets that he's holding on to, mixed with the very cool things that he gets to do, like he's a bull rider. I was like, this is it, man. This is an awesome role. And the show's just it's a fantastic drama. I mean, if you're into romance and all of that, then it's absolutely for you. And I think the modern Western is a really interesting way to go over those sort of old themes, and put it in a modern lens or through a modern lens. And Ransom does a fantastic job of that as well. So,
Very cool. Um, and so I guess, for folks who may be hungry like for more Westerns after watching Ransom, what are five Westerns that you'd recommend them watching or reading or just
oh,
getting into in general?
yeah. Okay. So my number one movie Western, it's a modern Western as well, it would be Hell or High Water. I think that stands above I mean, it's in my top five favorite movies of all time. Um, Obviously Yellowstone. I'm just gonna be rattling off all the Taylor Sheridan stuff, man. Taylor Sheridan's just got like a monopoly on this stuff. Yeah, Landman is amazing. Was it, I always confuse the numbers. Is it 1923 or like the
Yeah,
1883? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So those as well. You can always go back to the classic Clint Eastwood's. Then spaghetti westerns too. I mean, Django Unchained. Like, how do you not love that movie?
Yeah,
Um, Hateful Eight. I'm clearly a Tarantino fan. Um, yeah, man. Wow, yeah, I could just start rattling these off forever, but I think those would be like my main go-tos for TV and film.
for sure. And so you mentioned earlier just like your love of this character. So when from what we understand about Yancy, he's this enigmatic outsider. And so how do you go about, constructing someone like that through choices and like movement and dialogue and delivery? How do you go about constructing all that?
Yeah, so I worked with my acting coach on this. Each episode, her and I would spend a long time breaking this down and sort of what's at the core of my process and what I've learned from her is you know, what is my overall objective? What does Yancey want more than anything? And every scene, I have an objective, and that serves ultimately to get me to my, overall objective. And so I'm trying to win that. And having that sort of at the core of my decisions allows me to have a lot of freedom to move around and explore things. And that's, the exciting thing about acting, and especially being on a set and being with another actor. If you're prepared, you know your lines and like you've done your research, then you're very often sort of surprised by, the choices or the movements that you make. And I think that it ultimately comes down to a thing where once you've done the homework, then you kind of let it go, and I that's where the discoveries happen. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Very cool. And so, speaking of like scene partners, as someone who used to ride horses, I always wonder what it's like to work with horses on a set.
Mhm.
And so, like, did you, these are like a two-part questions, I suppose. Like, did you get to like bond with any of them? And like, did any of them have any like memorable personality traits or quirks, or are they all like just super disciplined professionals like you?
No, yeah. So that's it's super interesting because I had no horse experience before this, and we had this really intense cowboy camp where for a couple of months every day it was like 3 hours of riding, and roping, doing things like that, and the trainers who were just phenomenal. Like I mean, anyone I think who's shooting in New Mexico trains with them. And they were so patient and so great and got us all to like a really, I would say, pretty advanced level. But one of the things that they would do is they would switch you up. You know, you'd ride different horses, and having no experience with horses, I knew that they all had different personalities, but it's crazy how much they have different personalities. I mean, much in the same way, dogs do, but you're not riding a dog. And so there's this real connection between, you and this very intelligent animal that, you're trusting to go, take you on a trip really fast sometimes. Um, and so some of them, yeah, they would tell me they're like, yeah, he knows that my biggest problem was cornering. So just like going around a turn, trying to keep the horse in a lope. And I was like, why can't I do this? And the trainers would be like, they know that you're not able to like do it, so they're gonna take advantage of you. You gotta show them who's in charge. And that took me a long time to get used to. And then, you'll have other horses where sometimes it'd be like riding, driving a Prius versus driving a Ferrari, where I'm like, all right, like you give him a kick to go, nothing. And then, you gotta they're like, you gotta really let him know you're ready to go. And then other guys, like, you don't even do anything and they just take off. So finding that too. But the horse that I bonded with and my horse that I ride in the show, his name is Pistol. Um, Really loved this guy. He was great. He loved to pick up street cones. Like we would be using like street cones so I had to like keep him away from the street cones. I think I have a picture on my Instagram of him where he just like bends down and grabs street like you're okay. So he was great. And yeah, and it's interesting too because they would give us tips on acting on a horse too because they're like you no lower body acting, because even if you're just sort of like shuffling around, if you're doing a scene just standing, yeah, you might like adjust your weight. But if you're on a horse and you're arguing with someone and then like you kind of kick a little bit, horse moves a foot, ruins the shot. So like you got to keep your like lower body super still, do all the acting from the waist up. Yeah, a lot of small things that you don't think about until, you get to have that experience.
For sure. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess, to close out here, your character on Ransom is named Yancy Grey, and he's a foreman hired by James Brolin's character, a ranch owner named Cap. So, what was it like working with a legend like James Brolin? Was there anything you learned from just watching him in action?
Yeah, man, James, I love James. And I've been very lucky to work with a lot of really incredible actors, and he is one and one of them. And he has a very you'll hear about actors who, do a great job of doing something different each take or, coming up with ideas for their character. And James always kind of kept me on my toes like that. Not in a bad way, but he was always trying something new. So being able to react off of that is super easy. And there's, when I've watched like a couple scenes between him and I'll see a moment where they'll cut to me after he did something. And I'm like, that was a very, very real reaction from me. Because I was just like, what? What? Because you just throw something new at me and it was great. And, I often find myself, when it's not on my coverage and I'm watching, the other actor and there's so many talented actors on the show, they're doing something. And I'm just like, wow, they're great. And then I'm like, oh, we're acting, sorry. But James, yeah, he was constantly doing that. And he's been doing this his entire life. So, a lot of really great advice about, character choices and different stories that he's had on set and his time directing and whatnot. Yeah, he was a great person to learn from.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today
Of course.
and
Yeah, thank you.
have a good one.
Yeah, you too.